Well, we're getting more information about the gunman in Thursday's massacre in the US state of Oregon. Police now say the shooter died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound after exchanging fire with police. Authorities say they have recovered 14 firearms linked to the gunman. 9 people were killed and 9 more were wounded when the shooter opened fire at a community college. He was enrolled as a student there. Well, investigators are looking into blog posts linked to the gunman, which describe feelings of isolation and frustration. In an interview with CNN's Ryan Young, the shooter's father spelled out what he says is another major factor in this case.
The only thing I would like to say, a question that I would like to ask is how on earth could he compile 13 guns? How can that happen? You know, they talk about gun laws, they talk about gun control. Every time something like this happens, they talk about it and nothing is done. I'm not trying to say that that's the blame for what happened, but if Chris had not been able to get a hold of 13 guns, it wouldn't have happened.
That's a very powerful statement coming from you. So now I have to ask you, the idea, how did he get the 13 guns? Because, you know, that's what everyone's going to want to ask now, even when you're asking that question. Well,
look all over the world. You don't see these kind of mass shootings all over the world on a consistent basis like you do in the United States. So somebody has to ask the question, how is it so easy to get all these guns? How is it so easy? 13 guns. I've never held a gun in my life, and I never want to, but I know there are people that do. But you have to ask that question, is how was he able to compile that kind of arsenal?
Did you know he had 13 guns?
I had no idea he had any guns. I had no idea that he had any guns whatsoever. And I'm a great believer that you don't buy guns. Don't buy guns. You don't buy guns.
So even you want changes? You want the gun laws to change?
It has to change. It has to change. How can it not? Even people that believe in the right to bear arms. You know, what right do you have to take people's lives? That's what guns are, the killers. That's simple as that. It's as simple as that. It's black and white. What do you want a gun for?
Despite a loud outcry for gun reform in the United States, many people in the US strongly oppose any change in gun laws. That includes presidential candidate Donald Trump. At an event on Saturday, he promoted the use of guns.
By the way, it was a gun-free zone. I will tell you, if you had a couple of the teachers or somebody with guns in that room, you would have been a hell of a lot better off.
Australia implemented sweeping gun control measures nearly 20 years ago, prompted by a 1996 shooting massacre that claimed the lives of 35 people. Rapid-fire rifles and shotguns were banned. Gun owner licensing was tightened. Uniform national standards for registered firearms was established, and more than 1 million guns were collected and destroyed in a national buyback program. In the years following, the risk of dying by a gunshot in Australia fell by more than 50%. Firearm suicide rates also dropped by 80%. For more on all of this, Sam Lee is joining us. She's the chair of the Gun Control Australia lobby and joins us via Skype from Sydney. Thanks so much for being with us. Now, President Obama has referenced Australia's gun laws several times now. He's had plenty of opportunity to do that. He's made 15 addresses since becoming president after a mass shooting. For our international audience, just briefly describe the last massacre in Australia and the response by the government.
Well, our last massacre was in 1996, known as the Port Arthur Massacre, where a lone gunman had semi-automatic long arms and used that to kill 35 people and injure 19 others, not to mention to destroy a whole range of other people in that one experience.
President Obama said to an American audience, we've become numb to this. Americans are used to hearing about mass shootings. Just this year, according to one of our main source of trackers, there have been 294 mass shootings. That's if 4 or more people have been killed. But it seems any change to gun laws has so much resistance here. What do you think needs to happen to push through change?
Well, I think there needs to be an international response to this problem. Weak gun laws in America does have an impact on the international community, particularly that there are over 200,000 Australians living in America and 2.1 million Australians who visit America each year. I think the issue needs to be taken up at the UN level. Both Australia and America are signatories to the Arms Trade Treaty, which does allow room for discussions on these particular types of issues. Another issue that we've raised here in Australia is for our Prime Minister to place bans on political donations by the firearms industry. We're hoping that that will be supported by our Prime Minister here, so he would then be able to make some representations to the US President, and be able to push them to not take donations from the firearms industry.
The last time President Obama tried to introduce some very modest changes here, they failed. When Australia introduced changes, obviously there was a lot of resistance there. Just explain how much resistance there was at the time, and even the fact that the Prime Minister at the time, John Howard, wore a flak jacket to the first address about this.
Well, there was resistance from pro-gun lobby groups. However, there was not resistance from the general public. There was around 92% support for tighter gun regulation in Australia back in 1996. And a key difference, I guess, between Obama and John Howard, the Prime Minister at the time in 1996 in Australia, is that John Howard had just won his position back in to be Prime Minister on a significant majority. He then changed gun laws only a year later. So he had the momentum and support behind him and not the political pressure of an upcoming election. I think that made a huge amount of difference. But also there was an outpouring of grief and absolute shock across the country in relation to the Port Arthur massacre, and the public generally supported tighter gun regulation, and this meant that both state and territories were able to implement uniform gun laws, and that is a key part of any implementation of gun laws and their success in our country.
In the US, besides the NRA, there seems to be a very real fear among some sectors that they need guns because they distrust the government. The president almost joked about it yesterday. How do you get through to those people?
Well, you won't get through to the very tough pro-gun lobby group. What you do need to get through to is the people who are on the borders, those who don't support gun control, and what the President Obama needs to do, or anyone that takes up the president position later, needs to consider any political donations by firearms industry. What is causing the blockage in Congress appears to be this cosy relationship between political parties and gun lobby groups. And that cosy relationship has begun due to donations being made to political parties. Once you make a donation to a political party, there appears to be an expectation that you should get something for that money, and that has filtered through in terms of gun control in America.
That's a very good point. Sam Lee, we really appreciate your time today. Thanks so much for joining us.
You're most welcome. Thank you.